ballroom fell silent as 3 children walked through the golden doors. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Because standing there, dressed in matching formal clothes, were 3 beautiful children who looked exactly like the man on stage, the man being honored as CEO of the year, the man who swore he had no children, the man who abandoned their mother when she needed him most. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. 7 years earlier, when love was pure, promises were sacred, and a young woman named Catherine believed that true love could conquer anything. She was wrong, and the price she paid would break your heart. Welcome to Dr. Samuel Chronicles. If you are new here, support us by hitting the subscribe button, like the video, and comment your location, and the part that got you hooked in the comment section. Catherine Marie Harrison was 26 years old when she first met David Wellington III. She wasn't looking for love that day. She was simply trying to survive. Catherine worked 3 jobs to support herself through business school. During the day, she attended classes. In the evenings, she worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. And on weekends, she served coffee at an upscale cafe in downtown Manhattan. The kind of place where the coffee cost more than most people's lunch. It was a Saturday morning in October. The leaves were turning golden in Central Park, and there was that crisp feeling in the air that made everything seem possible. Catherine was behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her apron slightly stained from the morning rush. She had been on her feet since 5 in the morning, but she still smiled at every customer. That's just who she was. Kind, genuine, always seeing the best in people. Then he walked in. David Wellington III was 32 years old, 6 feet tall, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples and eyes the color of stormy seas. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Catherine's entire wardrobe. Everything about him screamed wealth and power. But that's not what Catherine noticed first. She noticed how tired he looked, how his shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight, how he sat down at a corner table and stared out the window like a man searching for something he'd lost. "Excuse me," Catherine said softly, approaching his table with a menu. "Can I get you something?" David looked up and their eyes met. Later, he would tell her that in that moment, something shifted in his chest, like a door opening in a room that had been locked for years. "Just coffee," he said. "Black. Strong." Catherine smiled. "Long night or early morning?" "Both," he admitted. And for the first time in months, David Wellington found himself smiling back at a stranger. That smile changed everything. Over the next 3 months, David came to that cafe every Saturday morning. Always the same table. Always the same order. Always hoping to see Catherine. At first, they just talked. Small conversations while she refilled his coffee or took her break. He learned that she was putting herself through school. That she'd grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania. That her parents had passed away in a car accident when she was 21. Leaving her alone in the world, but determined to build a life they would have been proud of. She learned that David was the CEO of Wellington Enterprises, a company his grandfather had built from nothing, that he worked 18-hour days. That success had brought him everything except the one thing he truly wanted, someone to share it with. "Don't you have family?" Catherine asked him one morning. David's expression darkened. "I have a mother and a sister. But family and love aren't always the same thing." Catherine reached across the table and touched his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it sent electricity through both of them. "Everyone deserves to be loved," she said softly. David looked at this beautiful, kind woman who worked 3 jobs and still had compassion to spare, and he knew he was falling in love. By December, they were inseparable. David showed Catherine a world she'd never known. Fancy restaurants, Broadway shows, weekend trips to his beach house in the Hamptons. But what she loved most were the quiet moments. Walking through Central Park holding hands. Making breakfast together in his penthouse apartment. Lying on the couch while he told her about his dreams and fears. Catherine showed David something he'd never experienced. Unconditional love. She didn't care about his money or his name. She loved the man, not the billionaire. She loved how he threw his head back when he laughed. How he remembered small details about her day. How he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. On Valentine's Day, David took Catherine to the top of the Empire State Building. The city spread out before them like a blanket of stars. Catherine Marie Harrison, David said, getting down on one knee as the wind whipped around them. You walked into my life when I'd given up on happiness. You showed me what love really means. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful. A simple diamond that caught the light like a captured star. But Catherine wasn't looking at the ring. She was looking at David's eyes, seeing the love and hope shining there. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony. Catherine wanted something intimate, and David would have given her anything. It was just them, a judge and 2 witnesses, because David insisted his family would make things complicated. Catherine didn't push. She was just so happy to be his wife. If only she had known what those complications would cost her. The first 6 months of marriage were blissful. David and Catherine moved into a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn. Her choice, because she said the penthouse felt too cold, too empty. She wanted a home, not a showcase. David loved how Catherine transformed their house. She filled it with plants and books and photographs. She cooked dinner every night. Even though they could afford a chef, she made their bedroom a sanctuary, their living room a haven. For the first time in his life, David Wellington understood the meaning of home. But outside their sanctuary, trouble was brewing. David's mother, Victoria Wellington, was a woman who valued 2 things above all else: money and status. When she learned that her son had married some waitress without even telling the family, she was furious. Do you have any idea what you've done? Victoria hissed at David during their first confrontation. She stood in her Fifth Avenue mansion, dripping with diamonds, looking at her son like he'd committed treason. We had an arrangement with the Ashford family. Their daughter? I don't love Caroline Ashford, David said firmly. I love Catherine. Love? Victoria laughed, cold and sharp. You're a Wellington. You don't marry for love. You marry for legacy, for business, for family. Catherine is my family now. Victoria's eyes narrowed. That girl is a nobody. She has no connections, no breeding, no money. She's using you, David. Can't you see that? You're wrong about her. Am I? Victoria moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Let me be very clear, son. If you stay with this woman, you will regret it. I will make certain of that. David left his mother's mansion furious, but not afraid. He had his own fortune, his own company. His mother couldn't touch him. But he underestimated how far Victoria Wellington would go to protect the family name, and he underestimated his sister's jealousy. David's younger sister, Vanessa, had always been competitive with her brother. While David built Wellington Enterprises into a billion-dollar empire, Vanessa spent her days shopping and her nights at charity galas, contributing nothing but spending everything. She lived off the family trust fund, bitter that David had inherited their father's business acumen, while she'd only inherited their mother's cruelty. When Vanessa met Catherine, she saw everything she could never be. Genuine kindness, natural beauty, honest love. And she hated her for it. So you're the little gold digger who trapped my brother, Vanessa said at their first family dinner, her smile sweet as poison. Catherine, trying so hard to make a good impression, just smiled. I prefer to think of it as loving him. How convenient that you love a billionaire, Vanessa purred. Tell me, did you look up his net worth before or after the first date? Vanessa, that's enough, David warned. But the damage was done. Every family gathering became a battlefield. Victoria and Vanessa worked together, making snide comments about Catherine's background, her clothes, her lack of pedigree. They questioned every gift David gave her. They implied she'd gotten pregnant on purpose to secure her position. That last part wasn't true, at least not yet. But 3 months after that horrible family dinner, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified to tell David, not because she thought he wouldn't be happy, but because she knew what his family would say. Catherine took the pregnancy test on a Tuesday morning, while David was at an early business meeting. She sat on the bathroom floor of their beautiful brownstone, staring at those 2 pink lines, and burst into tears. Happy tears, scared tears, overwhelmed tears. She was going to be a mother at her first doctor's appointment. She got news that made her head spin. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wellington," the doctor said with a warm smile. "You're having triplets." "Triplets?" Catherine whispered. Are you sure?" "Absolutely certain. See here?" The doctor pointed to the ultrasound screen, where 3 tiny heartbeats flickered like little stars. 3 healthy babies. Identical triplets, from the looks of it. Catherine drove home in a daze. Triplets. 3 babies. How would she tell David? She planned an entire evening. His favorite dinner, candles, soft music. She bought 3 tiny pairs of baby shoes and wrapped them in a box. When David came home that night, exhausted from a 14-hour day, Catherine met him at the door with a kiss and a mysterious smile. "I have something to show you," she said. "Over dinner." She gave him the box. David opened it, confused at first. Then understanding dawned on his face as he lifted out the tiny shoes. 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pairs. "Catherine, are you saying?" "We're having triplets," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. 3 babies. "Our babies." For a moment, David just stared. Then he let out a whoop of joy that probably woke the neighbors. He swept Catherine into his arms, spinning her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're having triplets," he shouted. "I'm going to be a father of 3. That night, as they lay in bed with David's hand on Catherine's still flat stomach, he made promises. "I'm going to be the best father," he whispered. "Our children will grow up surrounded by love. They'll never question whether they're wanted. They'll never feel alone." "I know," Catherine said, believing him with all her heart. "I promise you, Catherine, I will never abandon you or our children. Never. You're my whole world." She kissed him, tasting salt from both their happy tears. "I love you, David Wellington. I love you more." If only promises could protect against poison. When David told his mother about the pregnancy, Victoria's face went white. "Triplets?" she said, her voice deadly quiet. "That woman is having triplets?" "Yes." David was too happy to notice his mother's tone. "Can you believe it? 3 grandchildren." Victoria Wellington sat down slowly, her mind racing. This changed everything. If Catherine had 3 children, 3 heirs, she would be permanently entrenched in the Wellington family. She would have access to the family fortune. Her low-class blood would mix with the Wellington legacy forever. This could not stand. Victoria called Vanessa immediately. "The waitress is pregnant with triplets," she said without preamble. "My God," Vanessa breathed. "That's strategic," Victoria finished coldly. "She knows exactly what she's doing. Multiple heirs ensure her position. David will never leave her now. What are we going to do?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "We're going to save our family. Whatever it takes." Over the next 2 months, Victoria and Vanessa worked on David constantly. It started subtly. A comment here and there. "Are you sure the babies are yours, dear? With triplets, you never know." "I hope Catherine hasn't been too demanding. Some women use pregnancy to manipulate men. Your father's company nearly went bankrupt when he got distracted by family matters. Don't make the same mistake." David always defended Catherine, but the seeds of doubt had been planted, and Victoria Wellington was a patient gardener. Then Caroline Ashford came back into the picture. Caroline Ashford was everything Victoria Wellington wanted in a daughter-in-law. She came from old money, the kind of wealth that went back generations. She was educated at the finest schools. She moved in the right circles. She was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that comes from personal trainers and cosmetic dermatologists. And she had been in love with David since they were teenagers. Victoria invited Caroline to reconnect with David at a business dinner. Catherine was invited. Victoria claimed it was business only. "Dear, you'd be bored." Catherine, 5 months pregnant and starting to show, stayed home while her husband went to dinner with a woman who wanted to take her place. "Just business," David promised, kissing Catherine's forehead. "I'll be home early." But Caroline had other plans. At dinner, she was charming, witty, engaging. She reminded David of the summers they'd spent in Martha's Vineyard as teenagers. She talked about business and politics and all the things that Catherine, with her simple background, couldn't discuss. And when David's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine, just a simple "I love you," Caroline noticed how he smiled. "You really love her, don't you?" Caroline asked. "With all my heart," David said, simply. Caroline's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something cold. But then she smiled. "I'm happy for you, David." Truly, she was lying. Over the next few weeks, Caroline became a fixture in David's business life. She invested in Wellington Enterprises. She attended board meetings. She was always there, always perfect, always a reminder of the life David could have had. And every night, he came home to Catherine, who was growing rounder with their babies, who was tired and swollen, and couldn't talk about market trends or corporate strategy. David still loved his wife, but for the first time, he started to see her through his family's eyes. The waitress, the simple girl, the woman who didn't fit in his world. Everything came to a head at the Wellington family Christmas party. Catherine was 7 months pregnant, carrying 3 babies. Her doctor had ordered bed rest, but she insisted on attending. She wanted so desperately to be part of David's family, to be accepted. She wore a maternity dress, the nicest one she could afford, and she'd done her hair and makeup carefully. But the moment she walked into Victoria Wellington's mansion, she knew it was a mistake. Every other woman there wore designer gowns and dripped with jewels. They were all thin, elegant, sophisticated. And then there was Catherine, swollen and awkward, her ankles puffy, her face flushed. Caroline Ashford was there, wearing a dress that probably cost more than a car, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Oh, Catherine," Caroline said with fake sympathy, "you look so comfortable." The word comfortable sounded like an insult. David was immediately pulled away by business associates, leaving Catherine alone in a room full of people who despise her. She stood by the hors d'oeuvres table, trying to be invisible, when she heard Vanessa talking to a group of women nearby. "It's so sad, really," Vanessa was saying, her voice carrying. David was supposed to marry Caroline. They were perfect together. But then that waitress got herself pregnant. With triplets. Another woman gasped. "How convenient." "Exactly. My mother thinks she did it on purpose. To trap him." Catherine's face burned, her eyes filled with tears. She turned to leave, to escape this horrible place, when her foot caught on the edge of a carpet. She fell, not hard, but enough to send panic through her body. She cried out, holding her stomach, terrified for her babies. David appeared instantly, dropping to his knees beside her. "Catherine, are you okay? The babies?" "I'm fine," she whispered, but tears were streaming down her face. "I just want to go home. We're leaving now." As David helped her to the car, Catherine looked back and saw Victoria Wellington watching from the window, her expression unreadable. Later, Catherine would wonder if that fall was the beginning of the end, or the end had been inevitable from the start. After the Christmas party, Victoria and Vanessa intensified their campaign. They worked on David every single day. "She's so different from you. Dear, what will you talk about when the babies are born?" Caroline mentioned she's worried about the company's direction. "She's so sharp, isn't she? I saw Catherine's credit card bills. Do you know how much she's spending on baby things? It's excessive." David started staying late at the office. When he came home, he was distant, distracted. Catherine could feel him pulling away, but she didn't know how to stop it. At 8 months pregnant, Catherine could barely walk. Her body was carrying 3 babies, and every movement was painful. She spent most of her days in bed, alone in their beautiful brownstone, while David was at work. Or so she thought. One of those late nights, David wasn't at the office. He was having drinks with Caroline. Nothing physical happened. David wasn't that kind of man, but they talked for hours. About business, about life, about dreams. Caroline listened in a way that Catherine, exhausted and pregnancy-brained, couldn't anymore. When David finally came home at midnight, Catherine was crying in bed. "Where were you?" she asked. "I called your office. I was at a business dinner." "With who?" "Caroline Ashford and some potential investors." Something in Catherine's heart cracked. "You used to tell me everything. Now I have to ask. What's happening to us, David?" He looked at his wife, swollen, crying, needy, and for just a moment, he felt suffocated. Nothing's happening. You're being emotional. It's the pregnancy hormones. Catherine flinched like he'd slapped her. Pregnancy hormones? I'm carrying your 3 children, and you think I'm being emotional? I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? David ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. I don't know, Catherine. I'm under a lot of pressure right now. The company. It's always the company. Catherine's voice broke. What about our family? What about these babies? That's not fair, isn't it? Catherine struggled to sit up. You're never here anymore. When you are here, you're somewhere else in your head. Your family treats me like dirt, and you don't defend me. And now you're having secret dinners with a woman your mother wishes you'd married. Caroline is a business partner. That's all, is it? David looked at his wife, and in that moment, he felt something terrible. Resentment. Resentment that she questioned him. Resentment that she needed him so much. Resentment that his life had become so complicated. He didn't recognize that these feelings weren't his own. They'd been planted there, carefully cultivated by his mother and sister over months of manipulation. I can't do this right now, David said, grabbing his jacket. Where are you going? Out. I need to think. David, please. But he was already gone. Catherine sat alone in their bedroom, holding her swollen belly where 3 tiny lives depended on her, and she knew something had broken that might never be fixed. David went to his mother's house that night. Victoria was waiting, as if she'd known he would come. Sit down, son, she said, pouring him an expensive scotch. Tell me what's wrong. And David, exhausted and confused, told her everything. Victoria listened with false sympathy, nodding in all the right places. You know what the problem is, don't you? Victoria said finally. What? You married too fast. You didn't really know this girl. And now you're trapped. I'm not trapped. I love Catherine. Do you? Or do you love the idea of her? The simple, sweet waitress who made you feel like a hero? Victoria leaned forward. But life isn't a fairy tale, David. Marriage is about partnership. Catherine can't help you build your empire. She can't navigate your world. She's holding you back. That's not true, isn't it? Look at yourself. You're miserable. And it's only going to get worse when those babies arrive. Have you thought about that? 3 crying infants. A wife who will be completely focused on them. You'll be nothing but a paycheck. David shook his head, but the words were working their way into his brain like poison into bloodstream. Caroline, on the other hand, Victoria continued smoothly. Understands your world. She could be a true partner. She's already bringing in investors, helping the company grow. Imagine what you could accomplish together. Mother, stop. I'm married. I'm about to be a father. You can still be a father. No one is saying abandon your children. You'll pay child support, see them on weekends. But David, you have to think about your future, about the company, about your legacy. I made vows. I promised Catherine. You promised before you knew what you were getting into. Victoria's voice turned cold. Let me ask you something, son. Do you really believe those babies are yours? David stared at his mother. What are you talking about? Catherine worked 3 jobs when you met her. Do you know where she was all those hours? Who she was with? Triplets are very rare, David. Unless... Victoria paused meaningfully. Unless there were multiple partners involved. That's disgusting. Catherine would never... Are you sure? She came from nothing. She has everything to gain. A DNA test would tell you the truth. David stood up, his hand shaking. I'm not listening to this. Fine. Don't listen. But mark my words, David Wellington. If you stay with that woman, you will lose everything. Your company, your reputation, your future. Is she really worth that? David left his mother's house that night with her words echoing in his head. 3 babies. DNA test. Multiple partners. Trapped. Holding you back. He drove past his brownstone, unable to go home yet. Instead, he ended up at a bar, drinking alone, thinking about roads not taken and choices made too fast. His phone buzzed with text from Catherine. Are you okay? Please come home. The babies are kicking. I wish you were here to feel them. I love you. David stared at those words, "I love you," and felt nothing but numbness. What had he done? Catherine went into labor 3 weeks early, on a cold February night. She woke at 2 in the morning with crushing pain. For a moment, she was confused. Then she felt the wetness and knew. Her water had broken. "David," she gasped, reaching for him. But his side of the bed was empty. He'd been sleeping in the guest room for the past week, claiming he needed rest for an important business deal. Catherine struggled out of bed, her phone in her shaking hands, and called him. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. She called again. Nothing. The contractions were coming faster now. 3 babies. 3 weeks early. This was dangerous. She called 911, her voice breaking. "I'm pregnant with triplets. I'm in labor. I'm alone." The ambulance came. Neighbors watched as Catherine was carried out on a stretcher, crying in pain, calling for a husband who wasn't there. She tried David's phone from the ambulance, from the hospital registration desk, from the delivery room as nurses hooked her up to monitors, and doctors looked concerned about the baby's heart rates. He never answered. Catherine labored for 18 hours. Alone. No husband holding her hand. No partner coaching her through contractions. No one to tell her she was strong. She could do this. She wasn't alone. But she was alone. Finally, the doctors decided on an emergency C-section. The babies were in distress. They had to come out now. "Is there anyone we can call?" A kind nurse asked as they prepped Catherine for surgery. "My husband," Catherine sobbed. "His name is David Wellington. Please, he needs to be here. His children are being born." The nurse tried the number Catherine gave her. No answer. They wheeled Catherine into the operating room. And the last thing she remembered before the anesthesia took hold was thinking, "He's not coming. My husband is not coming for the birth of his children." At 11:47 p.m., the first baby was born. A boy for pounds, 2 ounces, crying strongly. At 11:49 p.m., the second baby arrived. Another boy for pounds even. Perfect and beautiful. At 11:52 p.m., the third baby came into the world. A boy, the smallest at 3 pounds, 14 ounces, but fighting with everything he had. 3 identical sons. 3 perfect miracles. And their father wasn't there to meet them. Where was David Wellington the night his sons were born? He was at a hotel bar with Caroline Ashford. They'd been working late on a business proposal, or at least that's what David told himself. Caroline had suggested drinks to celebrate closing a major deal. 1 drink became 2, became 3. David's phone was on silent in his jacket pocket, which hung over his chair. He never felt it buzz with Catherine's desperate calls. "You seem tense," Caroline said, moving her chair closer. "What's on your mind?" "Everything," David admitted. The alcohol had loosened his tongue. "My life is about to change completely. 3 babies. Triple of everything. Triple the responsibility. Triple the expense. Triple the chaos." "It doesn't have to be chaos," Caroline said softly. "With the right partner, it could be beautiful. Catherine is my partner." "Is she? Really?" Caroline put her hand on his arm. "David, you're about to be one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. You need someone who understands that world. Someone who can stand beside you, not just behind you." David looked at Caroline. Beautiful. Sophisticated Caroline who smelled like expensive perfume and understood corporate strategy. Then he thought of Catherine. Swollen, tired Catherine who talked about baby clothes and nursery colors. "I should go home," David said, but he didn't move. "Stay a little longer," Caroline whispered. "Just talk to me, like we used to." So David stayed. He stayed while his wife labored alone. He stayed while his sons fought to breathe their first breaths. He stayed while Catherine cried out for him, needing him, breaking apart without him. It wasn't until 3 in the morning that David finally checked his phone. 17 missed calls from Catherine. 6 from unknown numbers. A voicemail from the hospital. "Mr. Wellington, this is Mount Sinai Hospital. Your wife Catherine was admitted in labor at 2:30 a.m. She's asking for you. Please call immediately." David's blood ran cold. "Oh my God! The babies." He ran from the bar, leaving Caroline sitting alone, and drove like a madman to the hospital. But he was too late. His sons were already born. The damage was already done. And Catherine would never look at him the same way again. David burst into the hospital at 3:47 in the morning, wild-eyed and panicked. Catherine Wellington. He gasped at the reception desk. My wife. She was in labor. Where is she? The nurse looked at him coldly. She'd been the one who held Catherine's hand during delivery when no husband showed up. 4th floor. Room 412. Your sons are in the NICU. David ran to the elevator, his heart pounding. Sons. He had sons. 3 of them. And he'd missed it all. Room 412 was quiet and dim. Catherine lay in hospital bed, pale and exhausted, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Catherine, David whispered from the doorway. She turned her head slowly to look at him, and the expression on her face broke his heart. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was disappointment, resignation, the death of hope. You weren't there, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. I'm so sorry. My phone was on silent. I didn't see your calls. You weren't there when your sons were born. David moved closer, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. Catherine, please. Let me explain. Where were you, David? Now anger crept into her voice. Where were you while I labored alone for 18 hours? Where were you while they cut our babies from my body? Where were you? I was working. Business dinner. I lost track of time. With Caroline? The question hung in the air like a blade. David's silence was answer enough. Get out, Catherine whispered. Catherine, no. Please. Get out. She screamed it, her whole body shaking. Get out, get out, get out. Nurses rushed in. One of them put a protective arm around Catherine, while another ushered David toward the door. Sir, you need to leave. Now. She's just had major surgery. She can't have this stress. She's my wife. She's my patient, and you're upsetting her. Leave, or I'll call security. David left. He stood in the hallway, his hands shaking, realizing fully what he'd done. He'd missed the birth of his children. He'd broken the one promise that mattered most. And Catherine, his sweet, loving Catherine, was looking at him like he was a stranger who had betrayed her. The NICU was a maze of incubators and monitors and tiny babies. A nurse led David to 3 isolates in a corner, positioned in a row. These are your sons, she said, her voice professional but cool. Everyone in this unit had heard the story of the woman who gave birth alone. David looked down at the 3 tiny babies and felt his heart crack wide open. They were so small, so perfect, so fragile. Each had a little cap on their head, blue with white stripes. Each had an ID bracelet on their impossibly tiny wrists. Baby boy Wellington A, baby boy Wellington B, baby boy Wellington C. They don't have names yet? David asked. Your wife was too exhausted to think about names. The nurse said, judgment clear in her tone. She said she'd wait for their father. Shame washed over David in waves. Can I touch them? Wash your hands first. Then yes, but be gentle. They're premature. David washed his hands with shaking fingers, then reached into the first isolette. His son, baby A, was sleeping, his little chest rising and falling rapidly. David touched one tiny hand, and the baby's fingers curled automatically around his father's finger. Something happened in that moment. Something shifted in David's soul. This was his son, his child, his blood. He moved to the second isolette, the third, touching each of his boys with wonder and overwhelming love. These were his children, his sons, and he'd missed their birth because he'd been having drinks with another woman. What kind of man did that make him? David stayed in the NICU for 2 hours, just watching his sons sleep and breathe and exist. He made promises to them, the kind of promises fathers make to newborns. I'll do better, he whispered. I'll be better. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I'm here now. I'm here. But promises to sleeping babies are easy. The hard part is keeping promises to a wife whose trust you shattered. Over the next 3 days, Catherine and David existed in the same space, but lived in different worlds. Catherine recovered from her C-section, learning to nurse 3 babies, dealing with pain and hormones and exhaustion. David came to visit, bringing flowers she didn't look at and apologies she didn't accept. "I want to name them," Catherine said on the 3rd day, not looking at David but speaking to the space between them. "Okay, what names do you like?" "Alexander, Benjamin, Christopher." She finally looked at him, so they can go by Alex, Ben, and Chris. Simple names. Names that don't need the 3rd after them. Names that won't come with the weight of Wellington expectations. David flinched. The message was clear. "Those are good names," he said quietly. "I'm not asking your permission." "I know." The silence between them was heavy as stone. "David," Catherine said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Anything. Are you in love with Caroline Ashford?" David's immediate response was no, but Catherine held up her hand. "Don't answer right away. Think about it. Really think about it. Because I've been lying in this hospital bed, and I've had a lot of time to think. And I've realized something." Tears filled her eyes. "You've been pulling away from me for months. You work late. You're always with her. Your family loves her. And she fits in your world in a way I never will. Catherine, let me finish. The night our sons were born, you were with her. Not at work. Not in a meeting. Having drinks with her." Catherine's voice broke. "So I need to know, are you in love with her?" David looked at his wife, the woman he'd promised forever to, the mother of his 3 sons, and he knew his answer would change everything. The truth was, he wasn't in love with Caroline, but he'd been seduced by the idea of her, the ease of her, the way she fit into his world without challenging it. "No," David said, "I'm not in love with her. But you wish you'd married someone like her." The silence was answer enough. Catherine nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, then I need you to leave." "Catherine, no." "Yes, I need you to leave. I need space to think, to figure out how to do this alone. You're not alone. I'm here. Are you?" Catherine looked at him with such sadness. "Because I felt alone for months, David. And I can't live like that. I can't raise our sons in a house where I'm always wondering if you wish you were somewhere else. I want to be here, with you and our boys. Do you? Really? Or do you just feel obligated?" David didn't answer, and his silence said everything. "Go," Catherine said. "Please, just go." David left, and he didn't realize it then, but that was the beginning of the end. When Catherine and the triplets came home from the hospital, David wasn't there. He'd sent a nurse, one he'd hired, and a car service. The brownstone that had once felt like a home now felt like a mausoleum. Catherine struggled alone with 3 newborns, feeding every 2 hours, changing diapers constantly, getting maybe 45 minutes of sleep at a time. She called David once. "Can you come help? I can't do this alone. I'm in Chicago. Business emergency. The nurse is there. I don't need a nurse. I need my husband. Catherine, I have responsibilities." She hung up. That's when she knew the truth. The truth she'd been avoiding for months. Her marriage was over. David had chosen his world over hers. His company over his family. His mother's approval over his wife's love. And she couldn't fight anymore. 2 days later, Victoria and Vanessa showed up at her door. "We need to talk," Victoria said, sweeping in without invitation. Catherine, holding a crying baby in each arm while the 3rd wailed in his crib, looked at them with exhausted eyes. "What do you want?" Victoria looked around a messy living room, bottles and burnt cloths and baby swings everywhere, and wrinkled her nose in distaste. "I want to discuss the future," Victoria said. "Specifically your future. I don't understand. My son made a mistake marrying you," Victoria said bluntly. "We all know it. You know it. Even David knows it now. Get out of my house. This isn't your house. It's a Wellington property. Just like everything you have comes from the Wellington name." Victoria sat down uninvited. "But I'm not here to be cruel. I'm here to offer you a solution." Catherine stared at her, heart pounding. "I will give you $10 million, Victoria said. "In exchange, you disappear. Take your children. Leave New York. Start fresh somewhere else. Raise them away from our family. You're trying to buy my children? I'm trying to free my son from a mistake. He's miserable, Catherine. Surely you can see that. He doesn't love you anymore, if he ever did. This marriage is making everyone miserable. He has responsibilities, which he'll meet financially. Victoria interrupted. The 10 million is in addition to child support, which will be generous. Your sons will want for nothing materially, but they'll grow up away from the Wellington name, away from the pressure, away from a father who resents their existence. David doesn't resent his sons, doesn't he? Vanessa spoke the first time. He's been staying at a hotel for the past week. He sends nurses instead of coming himself. He can't even look at you without guilt eating him alive. Is that the father you want for your boys? Or would they be better off with the truth? Catherine felt like she was drowning. Think about it, Victoria said. Standing. $10 million. A fresh start. Freedom from a loveless marriage. I'll give you 3 days to decide. After they left, Catherine sat among her crying sons and cried herself. Because the worst part was, Victoria was right about one thing. David didn't love her anymore, and she couldn't live begging for love from a man who'd rather be anywhere but home. 3 days later, David came home to find Catherine sitting calmly at the kitchen table. The babies were asleep. The house was quiet, and on the table between them was an envelope. What's this? David asked, though he knew. Somehow he knew. Divorce papers. Catherine said quietly, I'm filing. David felt the floor drop out from under him. Catherine, wait. No more waiting. No more trying. No more pretending. She looked at him with clear, sad eyes. Your mother offered me money to leave. $10 million to take our sons and disappear from your life. David's face went white. She what? And the terrible thing is, I considered it. Because at least that way, I'd know the truth. That this was over. That I could stop hoping you'd come back to me. I'm right here. No, you're not. You haven't been here for months. Catherine's voice was steady now, as if she cried all her tears and had none left. You're with Caroline. Or at work. Or at your mother's. Anywhere but here with me and your sons. I'll change. I'll do better. You'll try for a few weeks, maybe a month. Then you'll resent us. Resent me for trapping you. Resent the boys for needing so much. And I can't live like that, David. Our sons can't grow up with a father who wishes they didn't exist. I don't wish that, don't you? Catherine stood up, and David saw how thin she'd gotten, how exhausted she looked. Be honest. For once in past 6 months. Be completely honest. Are you happy? Do you want this life? David opened his mouth to say yes. Of course yes. But the word wouldn't come. Because the truth was, he felt trapped. He felt overwhelmed. He felt like his life had spiraled out of his control. He'd imagined a different future, one with quiet dinners and easy conversation, and a wife who understood his world. Not 3 screaming babies and a wife who looked at him with disappointment and the constant, crushing weight of responsibility. His silence gave Catherine her answer. That's what I thought, she said softly. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not taking your mother's money, but I am taking our sons, and we're leaving. Leaving? Where? Away. Somewhere we can breathe. Somewhere your mother can't poison everything. Somewhere I can raise my boys without feeling like a burden. They're my boys too. Then act like it. Catherine's voice finally broke. Act like a father. Act like a husband. Act like the man I fell in love with. But you can't, can you? Because that man is gone. You've let your mother and your sister and Caroline turn you into someone I don't even recognize. David reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't. Please don't touch me. I can't break again. Catherine, I love you. No, you love the idea of me. The simple waitress who made you feel like a good person. But you don't love the reality. The messy, complicated, exhausting reality of actually building a life with someone. She picked up the envelope and held it out. Sign the papers, David. Let us both be free. David looked at the envelope like it was a snake. And if I don't, then we'll do this the hard way. Lawyers. Court battles. Your mother will get involved. It'll get ugly. And our sons will grow up in the middle of a war zone. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Please, if you ever love me at all, give me this. Let me go with dignity." David took the envelope with shaking hands. And in that moment, standing in a home they built together, looking at the woman he'd promised forever to, David Wellington made the worst decision of his life. "I'll sign," he whispered. Catherine closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you," she said. Neither of them knew that in 7 years, this moment would come back to haunt David in ways he couldn't imagine. Neither of them knew that karma was patient. And neither of them knew that 3 little boys would grow up to be the mirror that showed David exactly who he'd become. But all of that was still to come. 3 months later, Catherine and the triplets vanished. David came to Brownstone one day to see his sons. He'd been paying child support, meeting his legal obligations, even if his heart wasn't in it. And he found the house empty. Completely empty. No furniture. No toys. No forwarding address. Just a note on the counter in Catherine's handwriting. "We're starting over. Don't look for us. You wanted to be free. Now you are." David called Catherine's phone. Disconnected. He hired private investigators. They found nothing. Catherine and his 3 sons had disappeared completely as if they'd never existed. And David told himself he was relieved. He threw himself into work. He let Caroline get closer. He listened when his mother said, "This is for the best." He tried to forget, but at night, in his dreams, he saw 3 tiny babies in blue caps. He felt small fingers wrapping around his. He heard Catherine's voice saying, "I love you," and he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. 7 years passed. David built an empire. He won awards. He became one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. He had everything he thought he wanted, until the night of the CEO of the Year ceremony, when 3 children walked through golden doors and looked at it with eyes that were mirrors of his own. The children Catherine had hidden for 7 years. The sons who were about to change everything. And David Wellington, standing on that stage with a trophy in his hands and cameras flashing, felt his perfect world crack wide open. Because karma doesn't forget. And neither did Catherine. What happens when David sees his sons after 7 years? How did Catherine survive alone with triplets? What has she become? And what revenge has she planned for the man who abandoned them? Find out in part 2. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below.